when your corporation or your organization is faced with a false claim or an accusation that's inaccurate, what can that PR person, that spokesperson, whatever they may be called, do to ensure that they speak up to the media? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, all of that depends on how that particular public relations person is seen by the management with whom he's working, whether or not he's seen as strong or weak, whether or not he's seen as someone who has good judgment or doesn't, and whether or not he's seen as somebody who can get done what he says he'll get done, or can't. Most of that is a result of the connect between the chief communications officer, the chief public relations officer, and the CEO. Not all of my peers feel that way, but one of the reasons I feel that it's so very, very important that the chief communications officer report to the CEO, direct line, is that you never let an incorrect record stand. Then if you've been wronged, you take it on. I think the quote was Justice Holmes, that the first defense of an innocent man unjustly accused is righteous indignation. And I think if you've been unjustly accused, you ought to be righteously indignant and take it on. That's not a view that is universally held, and for good reason. You run a great deal of risks when you take these sorts of things on, and you have to be willing to go all the way to the mat on them. And many companies just don't want the hassle for that, in my opinion. The most important asset a corporation has is its reputation. And I think a corporation needs to do everything it possibly can to protect its reputation. I think you stand up and you defend yourself.
You mentioned something that has come up in several interviews that I've done, and you use you reference the corporate communications officer or the public relations officer. And I'm finding that some people are quite opinionated about those two titles. Some feel that communications, that's what an individual needs to be called. Others feel that it must be PR, that the PR planning, it has to happen before the communications begins. And what's your thought on all of this?
Well, I think it's fascinating that after all these years and after all of us who have done it, none of us can agree on what to call it. Now that says something. I'm not quite sure what it says, but that says something. And I don't really care what you call it. But it seems to me that the objective of this function is to get people to do something, not do something, or let you do something, to motivate, to affect behavior. The communications designation, to me, I think, has the possibility of being misinterpreted or misunderstood to the extent that it can be confused with data. Although I do, the most difficult thing we do is try to communicate, and we don't do it awfully well under any circumstance. But my position is I don't care.
So have some of these PR managers recently failed in their relationships with the CEO, or is it still just the general arrogance of the CEO who's really maybe not listening? And how do you...
Well, a couple of things have happened. I think that and again, many of my peers will disagree with me on this, but I think the importance of the function has eroded during that period in which there was the assumption, and continues to be the assumption, that public relations is a marketing function. It isn't. It's a CEO function. The chief public relations officer needs to be concerned about and thinking about the same sorts of things that the CEO is thinking about. One of those things is marketing, and one of the things that public relations can do very, very well, better than advertising in some circumstances, is support the marketing effort. But it's not a marketing function. That's only one portion of it. Let's have our chief public relations officer report to the chief marketing officer, or to an executive vice president somewhere who's doing something else, because this is just another one of those special functions, but not that special. that caused the function to erode, which then, in my opinion, took away a lot of the influence is the word, took away a lot of the influence that the CPRO ought to have with the CEO, one, because he wasn't doing things that were all that important insofar as the CEO was concerned. And he didn't have the CEO's ear all the time, and he wasn't thinking about the same things. And the CEO, I like the CEO that I work for, to think that I'm worried about the things he's worried about, and that I am paying a lot of attention to using my skills to help him get where he wants to go. If I don't, then I ought to get out.
So you've worked with numerous CEOs in your career. As the CPRO, as you said, the corporate or chief public relations officer, or as a private consultant. And you used all those experiences to write your book, The CEOs Playbook, from the perspective of the counselor kind of giving advice to CEOs, what to think about in their position. So talk a little bit about this book, why you wrote it, how it's been used, and just, well, you've really talked about the duties of a PR practitioner, and you've talked about the importance of the relationship, but what has come about because of this playbook?
Maybe something, but I can't imagine that anything of any real consequences come about as a result of it. I got a lot of things off my chest in it, and it pretty well summarizes what I think this game is. I use the game imagery in a positive way, not that it's insubstantial, but that it's very, very important. It is a game. There are winners or losers. There are really important stakes. But it's used in college classes. Some CEOs have used it, and one or two have told me they thought it gave them some good ideas. But I think that's probably about the extent of the book. Although, as I say, it gave me an opportunity. You may notice if you've read it, and perhaps you haven't, and it wouldn't surprise me. There is a chapter in here that's intended to educate the CEO, to explain to him that public relations isn't a marketing function, that it is a CEO function. These are the things that ought to be part of that function, and it all ought to report to you because the things that it gets done are so important to you that you can't afford to have amateurs do them. So that chapter, I hope, may have helped a little bit. But there are other things in there that are useful. This started as a series of memos to a young executive with whom I was working at the time, who was in line to be CEO. He was going to be CEO. And this started as a series of memos to him, explaining to him things that I thought he ought to know as he got ready for this job. One of which is that if you concentrate just on managing the company, you're going to lose, because a large part of your function is to manage all these outside forces that affect your ability to make a profit, which sort of speaks as well to the Page principles. The book makes specific reference to them, and I think Page was dead right and continues to be dead right in that all our companies operate at the pleasure of the publics they serve, and we had better serve them well. We had better look out for their interests, and we had better be responsive to them. And we need to operate in such a way that they will give us permission to operate profitably. I think that's true, and that means a couple of things, but shorthand, a lot of simple shorthand sort of things like try to do the right thing and tell the truth.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, thinking of your audience as being perhaps this next generation, that they're in college or in graduate programs and they're looking to break into this field eventually? Anything else you'd like to tell them?
Well, a couple of things. One, it's the best game in town, without, in my opinion. It's exciting. It's rewarding for people who bore easily, like I do. There's always something that you need to get to. You get to deal with. You get to deal with everything, literally everything. In a media sense, everything from film to blogs. You get to deal with all the issues that are important. So I think it's the best game in town, and I think the money's beginning to get to the point where it makes it part of the best game in town as well. There's that. The other thing I would say, not to professional, not to practice people who are practicing, but maybe to some extent, is that we have a tendency, or sometimes we've had a tendency to be very defensive about this this activity, profession, craft, trade. And that's dead wrong, because what we do is very, very important. And it's important because what we do makes a difference in what people know and what they think, and consequently how they act. And it is a tremendously important function. Not to be denigrated in any way, in my opinion, and not to be used loosely. I think we need to practice our wares. We need to practice our craft for people that we believe in and whose ethics we support, and not do so for others. So it's there are those things. I think is very, very important. One of the I think, as long as I'm rambling here, there have been a couple of things that have disturbed me about the field overall. I think our people, by and large, have not been nearly assertive enough. In senior circles, when you're sitting there with the chief counsel and the chief labor relations guy and the CEO, and people are making public relations judgments in this environment, I think our people don't often enough say, "I'm the expert. I'll make those decisions." I had, pardon me, a very good friend, chief counsel at Kaiser Aluminum while I was there, Bob Turner. I had this deal: you get to make all the public relations decisions, and I'm going to make all the legal decisions, and that worked. That worked pretty well, but I think we haven't been professionally assertive enough. The other thing I think that has disturbed me about many of the programs that I see, and one of the reasons that I think the field might not always get the respect and support that it should get, is that all too frequently our people are involved with programs not knowing what they want to achieve. I guess it's not necessary to be known and loved by all, but I think we feel that if we run opinion tests that say, "Oh, people have a favorable impression about us," that we've done our job. That's not the job. The job is to help the organization reach its goals, and we need to be very, very clear about what it is we're doing in each program in order to make sure that those goals are reached. So we don't have clearly defined objectives all too often. And I think those clearly defined objectives, understood by the senior line management of the company, when achieved, add real stature to the organization.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the subway all the way here and spending some time. I appreciate it very much, and
Pleasure.
I think your comments will be very, very valuable when added into our collection. Thank you.
Thank you.